The Brandon Peters Show may contain explicit language and detailed plot points. For more information on the show, stay tuned to the end of the episode. And now, here he is, Brandon.
All right, welcome back to the Brandon Peters Show as we begin year 5 of this little program. And joining me today, I have the head honcho over at Reverend Entertainment, Mr. Justin Beahm. Welcome back to the show, Justin.
Glad to be here. 5 years, huh?
5 years for this one. It was like Cult Cinema Cavalcade. Year 5 was the year it died.
Yeah.
But this one's going to stay because it's easier to maintain, and it's just what I want it to be every week.
Yeah. Well, congratulations, man. That's amazing. It's a milestone for a podcast.
It is. A lot of them don't even last one. Like I've been in this. I've been doing podcasting for like 12 years now,
Right.
and see so many come and go. And
Oh yeah. Well, kudos to you, man, and for keeping things interesting the whole time. I'm honored to be back, and I didn't know I was going to be the first one on year 5. So,
yeah,
geez, what an honor. Thank you.
I realized I was like, oh yeah, this is the first one of year 5 because the end of September, beginning of October is when I think it started. And you were here at the beginning, one of the first like 4 episodes like that. You helped launch.
Awesome.
This thing.
How fitting. Great.
Yes. With the Justin Beahm Radio Hour, which is back now, right?
Yeah.
That's
it's
great.
back.
It's back.
And I missed it sorely, but it's just work was prohibiting me from keeping up with it like I should. And so I decided I just miss it way too much.
Mm-hmm.
There were so many conversations I want to have that I knew my work wasn't going to ever lend itself to. So what the heck, let's do it. And I try to do it every week. Sometimes I miss 1 or 2 or 4, but I'm definitely in it for the long haul, and I'm loving it, man. It's been a lot of fun to have it back on the air.
Yeah, if anything, this show has taught me it's okay to take a break.
Yeah,
it's okay. You'll survive. It's all right. I have to, it's something I've had to learn. I'm still overly ambitious, but I've learned how like certain things are okay.
Yeah.
Nowadays. So
yeah, you gotta come find peace with that.
But yes. Exactly. Just before we get into this, a little show note up top. This is where I tell you about another podcast, listening to one, but the Out Now with Aaron and Abe horror specials, which populate October, are about to begin. And of course, as always, I partake in those. It's like one a week. They typically drop on Fridays. This includes some fun topics as well as a commentary for Gore Verbinski's The Ring and a conversation of The Babadook with Professor Mike Dillon, which I believe is like some contest winner's pick or something to talk about every year. So stay peeled. I'll be sharing those on my social media. That's Out Now with Aaron and Abe, the horror specials. One of my favorite things I do every year. And we have fun time. I'm gonna spoil one, but it's one of our topics is misleading movies where like the poster led you to believe something. Yeah, so like
the old bait and switch. Yeah,
the old bait and switch. The 80s, full of that.
I
was duped into many horror movie that did not live up to the poster. So I'm very excited about that one coming up. So keep your peeled. So Justin, we're here today because we're going to talk about the making of Paramount Presents Bringing Out the Dead, which debuted on 4K Ultra HD Blu-ray. I believe September 17th. That was when it dropped.
Yeah,
I think so. Yeah,
2 days ago. Yeah.
So just to note, I was not sent this one for review. This episode and discussion is of my own volition, and I'm excited just hear Justin's journey making this movie that jumps straight from DVD to 4K.
Yeah,
because this one just was sitting there untouched forever. So you told me to begin this off the air many years ago that this was, I believe it was off the air. It was like a bucket list title for you that you wanted to get off the ground. And then like a year later, you were like, well, I got the green light on it. But let's, before we get to all that, just your thoughts on Bringing Out the Dead as a movie in general. What drew you to it?
I am really into. I love real cerebral cinema. Films that challenge us and that can strike challenging internal chords and find resonance there. And it's a really unusual movie. It's unusual for Scorsese. It's unusual for Nick Cage. It's really unusual for everybody that's involved with it,
Mm.
with Paul Schrader writing and Bob Richardson shooting it. Scorsese, and I think what really draws me to it is the heart of the story is this guy who is failing at what he should be doing. He's very driven and very passionate about saving lives as his paramedic, Nicolas Cage's character. And yet he's found this moment where he hasn't saved a life for a long time, and the people he's lost are starting to sort of haunt him and creep into his day-to-day failures. And as that's happening, he's breaking down because he's pushing himself harder to do better, which is in turn counterproductive overall because it's killing the guy. And so it's this I just think it's such a poignant rumination on existence, on the fragility of life. I've been really over the last, especially like 10 years of my life, been incredibly introspective, and a lot of talk and conversations with people, even in interviews that I conduct, about the fragility of life and about the imprint we leave on spaces. Like when I was at the Stanley Hotel interviewing Chelsea Wolfe, we were talking about the permanence of our impact on a space. And here we are in this hotel that was like 100+ years old, where people have lived, died, maybe been born. I don't know, but it was a tuberculosis clinic at one point. There's so much history just within these walls, on these stairs and everything. And so that's really been a place that I've been existing for about 10 years now of my life. And there are some movies that really touch on that. There are some movies that strike that chord beautifully. And a Ghost Story is one of them. And another one would
Yeah.
be Bringing Out the Dead. And I think part of it too is that underdog thing where it's like it's the Scorsese movie no one talks about. It's the one that bombed. It's the Cage film that no one has seen. And so it's like this it's so rare to have something that you can point to and say genuinely like this is a hidden gem. That's
Mm-hmm.
always used. Lost masterpiece is used all the time for so many different movies, but how often is that really the case? And with this one, it has always been. And when I bring it up in conversation, either there's only two reactions. One, people have never heard of it, didn't know it existed, or two, they love it.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, I've been saying forever, from the very beginning of my time doing this stuff forever ago, at the top of my wish list was Bringing Out the Dead, and I would put up kind of playful posts once in a while every few years. Hey, just a reminder, I'm still doing everything in my power to try to bring Bringing Out the Dead to a proper release, because it had that DVD, which was fine, but then nothing forever.
Mm-hmm.
And then when I got on at Paramount, I mean, I don't want to jump too far ahead, but that was a priority for me from the very beginning.
Yeah. You mentioned, yeah, it is in my opinion, the most overlooked of Scorsese's movies, because a lot of times people have said, I don't like to use the term underrated, because I'm like, what rating are we? What is
Yeah,
the consensus rating
yeah,
that we're talking about? Because
yeah, yeah.
this is all like, if you're talking about like people talking about, okay, so it's less
Under
appreciated,
discussed.
under discussed,
Yeah,
but After Hours and King of Comedy typically come up in that, but I feel like those have gotten their due. And
yeah,
I'm not just talking about home video. I think those are actually appreciated now in a place where they weren't quite upon release, but they had the years. This one's still waiting, I feel like.
yeah.
And I saw it back when it came. I did not get to it in the theater, but it was on, like, oh, something I want to see back when it came out in 99. And people talk about 1999 as one of the best years for movies. And this is
Hmm.
one of the reasons why.
Yeah,
And I've never understood why it just wasn't liked at the time, because it hit with me right away. And it's one of those movies where, like, you actually these people in the medical field have to deal with loss that has no connection to them other than that they were the person working. And then this one really shows the weight of it on a
yeah,
person, and how it can play with their minds in different ways, because you got Sizemore, Cage, Goodman, Rames, and then civilian people as well, and doctors in the office that are really hardball, and then some are just lackadaisical, just the different perspectives. with which they handle people's lives and problems and
Yeah.
death throughout the movie. And
the complicated relationship with
Mhm.
Patricia Arquette's character.
yeah,
And that, because it's there's nothing natural or normal about how they meet and how things progress. It's not like that look across the room in a challenging moment and start swooning kind of a thing. They're both people who are hurt and who are hurting deeply and dealing with a lot of internal and external forces on them that are causing all kinds of pain and confusion. They just happen to bump into each other at a time where they're in the same space at the right time, not right time, but the same time. And their bond is kind of like a grief bond
hmm
as this thing unfolds. And nothing happens in this movie that normally happens in movies.
yeah,
There isn't a lot of anything obvious. There's no tropes. There's no anything. And the interplay between the paramedics is different with the vibe, and that's how it is in life.
hmm
You're teamed up with someone new, it's going to be different. And some guys are insane like Sizemore, some guys are just hilarious like Ving Rhames. And so I mean, it's a slice of life shot beautifully,
hmm
and that is one of the most genuinely haunting and thought-provoking movies I think I've ever seen.
yeah. And also, I get, yeah, we should chalk it up to being underappreciated Schrader too, because
Yeah.
this is in his wheelhouse of these characters that he's brought to cinema time and time again. And then it's, him and Scorsese work a classic team up here,
Hmm.
and just it gets missed in the must, like, oh, go through their canon. But yeah, and it does bring that kind of stuff to light here.
Yeah.
Just to, it's, yeah, it's deep, but it's not completely depressing, but it's got a whole wheelhouse you have to juggle with and think about after for quite some time.
Yeah, it's not. I mean, okay, so it's based on a book by Joe Connolly, who was a
Hmm
paramedic and who was with them while they were shooting, amending the script and dressing it up. I mean, he was a real influence on the whole thing. And everybody who was involved were taking rides with paramedics to see what it's like.
Yeah.
And these people being paramedics, they live in this universe where their job is sitting around, and then the switch gets flipped, and then
hmm
it's instant adrenaline, and then you're reliant on that adrenaline to carry you through some of the most nightmarish scenarios that most people never have to encounter in
Yeah.
life. But night after night they're hitting that, and then it's these highs and lows, and so you're constantly pinballing back and forth emotionally with that. And having Joe Connolly as a reference for them, I think, was really valuable because it allowed it to remain rooted in reality. And it didn't ever, I mean, the realism of it mixed with this artistry, of course, but the realism of it is what keeps it from submerging just into despair and darkness or up into comedy and parody or something. It exists somewhere in the middle. And there are lighthearted moments and there are some really hurt, like painful moments in the film. And it's a real ride. It's a real experience. And to your point earlier about it not really being discovered so much, the hope is that this release helps with that and
Yeah.
whatever releases follow, because it's been invisible in the market forever
Right.
and relegated to like bootlegs and bare bones DVDs and stuff, and which is really too bad. And so that's the big hope. And it was so amazing the day that pre-orders opened, and it instantly was like number one on all disc sales and in all of its categories and everything. It's like, okay, people might pick this up. This
hmm
might be the chance for people to see it. And I frankly think that this is all why the people who are involved with it wanted to be, that I
Right.
brought in for the special features, is because everyone felt that it was an underserved film and that they all put a lot into something they cared a lot about. But it's the one that they've always all talked about and went like, yeah, I was in Face Off, or yeah, I was in whatever. But Cage always talks about this film.
hmm
He's always brought it up in interviews, not even necessarily in context. He'll bring it up just to try to point people in that direction and say, check this out.
Yeah.
Please pay attention to this movie. So it was a real honor to finally have it happen and to be a
Yeah.
little part of it.
And if, the disc collectors are the taste makers of the home video watching, so maybe the streaming enthusiasts see that, try
Yeah,
to find it on streaming or get it to some service, and then it
sure.
keeps growing here. many
Yeah.
many years later. So okay, let's go to the genesis of this project here. Um, with you getting in at Paramount and bringing it up. What were the early conversations like in trying to suggest it?
Well, in the very beginning, my earliest conversations involved some wish list discussion
Mm-hmm.
with the executive that I was working with there at the time, and this was always at the top of my list. And at that point, the pathway to it wasn't clear for some reason. They were like, yeah, I mean, it's just sort of one of those that we're not, maybe at some point, but it's not a real, it's not on the front burner, I guess,
Okay.
would be the way to say it. And so I don't know what the reasoning was behind that, but it took a long time. But when I was having meetings about whatever, I would, at the end of it, throw in, oh, guys, and can't wait for bringing out the dead. And they'd be like, oh, here he goes again, kind of a thing. And it just became this kind of running joke, but I was serious. Like, I just
Mm-hmm.
wanted to keep this little fly in the room, and maybe someday it'll land in the right place. And eventually, um, about 2 years into my time working with Paramount is when it finally came up, and they said, we can, we think we can do this now. We're waiting to hear back from Scorsese, and because they don't do any of these without the approval of the director and all of
Mm-hmm.
that if they're alive. And they said, but we really appreciate your motivation with this, and I'm sure that's a nice way of saying thank you for annoying us, and or not thank you for annoying us. And then we got the green light, and Scorsese was like, yeah, he gave it his blessing, and new transfer was going to start happening. And then the long, long journey to the
Mm.
release date a couple weeks ago began.
Yeah. So when you were mapping this out, so the transfer and stuff, that's all done away from you. You're more in charge of the interviews and the bonus
Yeah.
content.
Yeah, I have nothing to do with transfer or anything
Right.
like that. So that's done with in this case, Scorsese was directly involved with them as they were running the
Mm-hmm.
scan, and any kind of updates to soundtrack and things like that, he was directly involved with, which is a hallmark of the Paramount Presents series
Mm-hmm.
that this is a part of as of right now. And if the titles are successful enough in that, because Paramount Presents is technically a limited run series,
Right.
then they get re-released into the general
Yeah,
catalog down the road.
they've started I've noticed now, like I think Double Jeopardy got a regular release
Mm-hmm.
and some couple other ones. So that's
And
pretty.
Breakdown's headed there too.
Oh
It's
yeah.
in the Paramount Scares box that comes out in October, but also I think after that it's going to enter general catalog, I want to say, which is
Yeah, that
super
and Friday the
exciting.
13th Part 2 seem
Yep.
to look like they're hitting on the UK with dates, and then there's some placeholder UPC codes for the US or whatever.
Yeah.
But it's Friday the 13th. It's gonna get its own release at some point, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Although
Yeah.
that Scares has come with a very cool personalized Fangoria pin. Like I got the first one for a review when that came out, and I was for something I was like, yeah, it was stuff that's already out and whatever. When I got that set, I was like, oh, this is really well put together. Like I
Yeah.
can't
Yeah.
deny it. And the Sweeney Todd transfer was amazing.
Yeah.
And I was just like, okay, now I'm gonna have to keep up with these
It's not
because
like a money grab. A lot of times
no.
these companies will re-release stuff, not these being Paramount, but a lot of companies re-release things, in sets just to try to get another dollar out of it. But
Mm-hmm.
the entire Paramount Scares thing is the company's effort to reach out to horror fans and acknowledge their roots in the genre,
Mm-hmm.
because it's been a huge part of Paramount's foundation forever, and not just with the Friday the 13th films, but and so it's a real effort to connect with horror fans and to bring different eras into a release, but
Mm-hmm.
they're all being handled as though it's an individual release. So it's really nice. And the breakdown Blu-ray sold out pretty quickly when it came out in Paramount Presents a few years ago, and it's
Yeah,
been so frustrating because I get asked about it all the time. It's an amazing release,
it
and I
is.
was
I
so
think we talked about it on
I think we
a
did.
previous episode. Yeah,
Yeah.
because that
And
made my tops of the year one year. Yeah,
I
that
was
was a good one.
so proud to be a part of that, and then it just disappeared. And it's like,
Yeah.
man, and I kept bothering, like, when is this going to hit? Whatever. So I'm thrilled that that's part of it this time. And then the Friday the 13th Part 2 is continuing the 4K Friday rollout that
Yeah,
they've
are
been
they?
doing. So
What's the mentality? Because I feel like they could just come out with like Paramount could come out with their 8 and just on a 4K set and do boffo business and then slowly do them, but they're doing them like one. Are they doing one at a time, or are they gonna stop at 4 and then do all 8? Because it's
As
a
far as I know, it's just going to continue being one at a time
okay,
because the 8, what is it, DVD box set is out there, or
right.
Blu-ray box set, or whatever it is.
There is that
It's
one, yeah. But for
yeah,
4K is what I'm wondering. It's like they
right,
went out with the first one,
right.
okay, tick, tick, and then
I
like
know.
it's weird because like when the people on the fandom side, I understand business is different than what you want, but
Mhm.
like on the fandom side, there's I'll just wait for the set. A lot of the times I was like, okay, well they want to see that and then do the set. It's like a weird
I'm
hit
not
in the
sure if there's
middle.
ever going to be a set. When I've
Okay,
asked about it, they're like, "We're not really sure yet."
oh, wow.
So
I,
it's it,
I feel like
it
those are their bread and butter too. It's like, what are you guys doing? But yeah.
well, also it's expensive to do these transfers,
True.
and
Yeah, yeah. No, the 4K stuff is much more expensive than Blu-ray was. That's true.
yeah,
Yeah.
and I think that now that the Paramount Scares shingle is underway
Hmm.
in its second year of existence, and it's going to continue to grow, I think, over time
Yeah.
to involve different elements and different things for fans. But I think that they want to make sure to give each one attention is the way it seems to
Okay.
me. That's the read that I've always gotten from it. Like, okay, it's an event when these things land, just like it used to be back in the day
Right.
when Anchor Bay would put something out on widescreen videotape or something, and it'd be like, wow, we get zombie and widescreen. I
Yeah.
can't believe this. It wasn't like, I need every Fulci film now. It
Right.
was
Right.
like,
Right. Right.
well, whatever. Or whoever thought that a Friday the 13th box would have been possible from Shout Factory, or that a Halloween box would have been
Right.
possible from Shout Factory. That's like catching lightning
Yeah.
in a way. It's kind of incredible that they even occurred. And so I don't know about a box set on the
Yeah.
Friday 4K front, but as far as I've heard so far, there's nothing certain
Right.
about that occurring at any
Yeah.
point.
I'm just trying to think of. I get things, but I'm like, what would someone listening be like sitting at home wanting to ask? So I'm trying to think. Okay, what would they ask? But
Yeah.
so you're saying I have to wait quite a while for a new beginning to get the
I
4K
guess.
treatment. Oh
Yeah.
man.
Yeah. If I catch word of anything else and I can share it, I certainly will. But I'm not privy to any. I mean,
Gotcha. No, I get you. I get you.
yeah.
I get you.
Paramount's kind of in a crazy position right now because of
Right.
the whole purchase thing that's going
Right.
down. And so there's uh there's a lot of movement happening behind the scenes there, and everybody's just kind of holding on and hoping for the best right now.
Right. I hear you.
And that includes us guys on the outside that are on the periphery, just hoping my team stays intact and we
Yeah.
can start rocking and rolling again soon.
Their home videos, they've been doing it. I mean, ever since they launched that Presents line
Yeah,
and stuff, they've been a real great effort. It's been really
yeah,
exciting for Paramount.
absolutely.
Including Bringing Out the Dead, which we're back at
Yeah, yeah,
here. So
yep.
so yeah, you can pitch that with Scorsese. So did you make like a master list of like all the people you'd want to interview, and then do you get like a budget and then you break it down from there, or how's that
This this one is a little bit different
okay.
because Paramount does function on a pitch basis, where the other companies, they will assign me a budget and then it's like, do as much as you can with this.
Hmm.
And that's how it works. But with Paramount, I have to present a pitch of each person and why I want to bring them in and how I want to bring them in. And then that goes to marketing. And then marketing looks at that and approves or has questions about people or whatever angle I want to take on something. But once that's approved, then we get into the realm of budget and all that stuff and due dates and whatnot. But it starts with a wish list. And on this one, of course, I wanted everybody.
Yeah.
Just like I always start wanting everybody, but that's not always possible financially, and also a lot of people aren't available. Um, that's always the case, but everyone can rest assured if there's someone you feel like should have been part of a release and they weren't, there were people trying to make that happen. It always is the case. But I knew at the very least that I wanted to have Scorsese, Cage, and Schrader. Those were the three that I for sure wanted to have on board. And then everything else was like almost like icing on that in a way.
Hmm.
But I knew that those three were also going to be very complicated to get. So they involve a lot of logistics that a normal interview wouldn't, where I can just find someone, figure out what day they're free in LA, schedule a studio location, and then have us show up at the same time. I mean, it's not that easy for everybody.
Hmm.
But in this case, when you're dealing with especially two people in Scorsese and Cage who are always busy, I knew it was going to be a challenge getting into scheduling with it. So I didn't push too hard for anyone else outside of them on this, just because I knew that having them there was going to be essential and going to be a challenge anyway.
Gotcha. And I think you told me like Cage took a while to get because he was busy. Like he kept getting like high profile work
Yeah,
or
he
something like
kept.
that. Like
They both.
Renfield postponed it or something.
Well, Renfield was first. I mean, it was all the way through to Longlegs.
Okay.
I mean, he was just finishing Longlegs, I think, at the point where I shot him, and I think that's right. And I mean, for both of them, for Scorsese and for Cage, they both were on board immediately.
Hmm.
They were both very enthusiastic about it, but they were both very busy. And so scheduling became this constant thing of like annoying these people about, okay, is he available yet? When is he available? I did have Scorsese scheduled at one point. I even had flights and hotel booked and everything for crew and all this stuff. And then he had to back out of that, which became a whole thing. And so, but to their credit, Paramount hung in there. There was a moment at one point where Paramount was kind of like leaning a little bit toward, let's just put it out. Let's just
Gotcha.
have the 4K speak for it. But I was pleading and begging, like, no, it's really, really worth it. And I believe that we're going to get these guys, because
Hmm.
it was like a year into this where I had been reassuring Paramount, no, I'm sure they're going to do it. I know they want to do it, because the people kept telling me that, like their agents, manager, whoever, assistants, kept telling me that they're really, really excited. And then Cage started, when he was doing like Renfield press and press
Hmm.
for all these other films, he was talking about his upcoming interview for Bringing Out the Dead with me. So
Oh,
he would be like, "Oh, and I'm really excited that Bringing Out the Dead is finally getting some love, and I'm going to do an interview for it finally after all these years." And so he's out there. That helped my case too with the studio, because it's like, look, he's still talking about it. But Scorsese was shooting Killers of the Flower Moon in that
mm.
window. And then it became this never ending string of additional shoots on that. And then Cage just kept making film after film after film. And it came down to it with Marty that it was like, I mean, it was literally it was like a year and a half into this process. And then one day we get a message from his assistant saying he can do it. He's only available on one day for this little block of time. And then he's going on this worldwide festival tour with Flower Moon. And that day that he can do it is Friday. And this was on like a Tuesday.
Oh.
And so we had to put a, a carnival into motion to get this thing to happen. I mean, all of a sudden I'm coordinating crew in New York City, getting myself there. And then there were requirements for his people to, about where they wanted it to be shot and all this. So we had to do all this scheduling and booking, and it was absolutely insane. And we had 3 days to put the whole thing together. And the team at Paramount was amazing about not even flinching. Like, let's go, let's go, let's go, let's get it done.
Hmm.
And we get up there. And then that's when I called Schrader and asked if he'd be game for that same day coming in right after Marty, because we're going to be set up anyway. Just flip the
Yeah.
shot. And he was thrilled to do it. And so it became a really incredible day in New York City shooting these two guys. And it was a complete whirlwind, one of those things that happens so fast, and then all of a sudden you realize you're back home and it's over. And 2 days ago you
I
were sitting in the room with Martin Scorsese. Like, what the hell? So I used that though then when
Yeah.
I reached back out to Nick's or to Cage's guy, and I'm like, hey, we just shot Marty, we just shot Paul. Super. And my messaging is always like, can't wait to get Nick in the chair, looking forward to it, going to be a
Hmm.
little celebration, blah blah blah. And then all of a sudden he started moving quicker. Okay, now he has time because he's back from this shoot. He's just wrapping. He'll be available on these days, this day. And he lives in Vegas. And so then
Hmm.
I made plans to head to Vegas. And so spent the night at my DP's house down in Laguna Beach, Laguna Niguel, and woke up at like 2 in the morning. hopped in the car, loaded our gear up, and drove to Las Vegas and got some coffee when we pulled into town and went right to Nicolas Cage's house. And it was an incredible
Wow.
day I'll never forget. And it
What
was
was he like as
amazing.
a house? Was he like a host? Like, come on, I'll show you some things, or
Absolutely.
because he's like a nerd. Like, so it's
He
like,
is.
yeah.
He loves this stuff. And I fully expected to have like a housekeeper answer the door or something.
Mm-hmm.
That's usually the case with these kinds of things. We pull up and there's a Ferrari. He has an archway. Like
Okay.
there's no front door in his house on the exterior. And he's in this gated community anyway, but there's this
Okay.
archway there and he had I think it was a Ferrari parked in the middle of it. The front door is actually in like through that archway and then there's kind of a round circle thing with a fountain deal in the middle of it. And this big door and there's a simple little like wipe your feet mat that has the letter C on it right by the door, like that, like
Okay.
something you go to like Walmart and buy. And
Yeah.
I remember being struck with the simplicity of that floor mat sitting there, like the doormat. And I knock on the door, and then Justin, here's Nick Cage standing right in front of me, and he goes, "I have to apologize. I have a baby. It kept me up all night, so I'm kind of tired. And I said, well, yeah, I've been up since 2 a.m. and I didn't really sleep last night because of the prep. And he goes, perfect. We're on Frank Pierce time, which Frank Pierce is his
Right. Yeah.
character in the film. And he goes, this will be great. And then he's like, let me show you around. And he goes, oh, you probably want me to move my car, right? I'm like, yeah. So here he is barefoot, just strolls across, starts his car up, moves it over like any dad would. And comes back and he's like, hey, come on in, take your shoes off. My wife likes to have people with their shoes off. And so, okay, we took shoes off. And my crew is waiting for me in the car. Like, do we come in? I signaled to him first, like, pull in kind of a thing. And then Nick gave me a tour of his house. He opens the door and it was this incredible house that
Yeah.
with this, like, I don't know, 40-yard long dining table, 50-yard. It was like the table in Batman
Yeah.
when Vicky Vale and Bruce Wayne are sitting there on
Right.
opposite ends. Like, what did you say? It was like that next to this
Oh
giant
wow.
fireplace. He had a bird aviary in his living room with these big
Oh
hawks and
my.
stuff in it. Fish tanks all over. Massive movie posters. One of them was for Creature from the Black Lagoon. I remember. Mostly horror type stuff that was
Mm-hmm.
hanging up. Um, just an open concept kind of a thing. He had these dragon sconces. I don't know what you call it, like a floor sconce lamp thing, and they were
Okay.
all over. That's what like the lighting was on, or all these big steel like metal dragon sconce things. And then in the midst of all that, there's a little Tykes playpen and a little Tykes climber house for like just little toddlers because he has kids and stuff. That's
Yeah.
mixed in with all this. But he was really excited to show me his newest addition. He goes, I really want to show you my blacklight room. And I'm like, okay. And there's a stairwell in the middle of his living room. He opens this baby gate because everything was baby gated. And then you go down this really tight circular staircase and
Yeah.
you're down under the living room in this pitch black hallway. And the only light in there is black light. And on every inch of the walls and the ceiling are those fuzzy black light posters from like head shops
Oh yeah.
of bands or movie posters or just like hang in there or
Oh
stay
wow.
cool, whatever it was. It was painted with these things. And he goes, I've been working so hard to finish it. I just got it done and I'm so proud of it. And it was just this sort of underground. And at the end of it was like a sleeping area. So it's kind of like a guest bed or something. But I'm like, he was just most excited to show me this black light hallway under his
This is
living room.
awesome.
But then, I mean, he was absolutely charming. He was so sweet with his time. As we set up, he's like, shoot anywhere, whatever you need. So I found whatever. We got everything set up. He went up and got ready, came down, and I didn't have to pay for hair and makeup or anything for him, right? It's
Oh.
just he just goes and does his thing. And then he was checking in with his wife, introduced us to his wife. A couple of his kids were there, his baby was there. And that was really, you could tell that he was really grounded in them because
Mm-hmm.
as he's talking about whatever in prep and then afterwards, he just gravitated over there to the baby and to his wife and holding the baby and chatting and stuff. And he was just so casual about everything. It was really like walking into just any loving parent's house,
Yeah.
except it was Cage's world. And the interview was incredible. He had made notes on his phone to make sure he covered everything he wanted to. So once in a while, he would like, grab his phone and like, oh yeah, yeah, okay. And or I'd ask a question,
Wow.
he'd say, I have a quote for that. Oh, I do have the quote. So he making sure he quoted the film properly, very prepared
Did
and
homework. Yeah.
very passionate about the whole thing and totally open, man. It was probably my favorite interview of all time that I've ever done in
Wow.
person with somebody, and it was unforgettable. And then I left there and went to my cheap as shit hotel room at Circus because I got the
Boom.
cheapest thing I could get.
There you
And
go.
my Uber picked me up about 3 a.m. and I was out of there the next day. I
Ah.
mean, that was it. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. That's crazy. Yeah. Like it's a terrific interview. And I love one of the things he noted. He's talking about Scorsese and how he would take him to while they were shooting and stuff, he'd like show him films at his screening room,
Yeah.
and like it was like he knew I was a fan of. Did he say Creature from the Black Lagoon? I think is in that interview. I think he says
I think,
Scorsese
yeah.
showed him a
I,
print of that
I think yeah, I think he did.
or
Yeah.
some.
And he said something about it was like a colorized version or something. I don't,
There's
something like
Phantom of
that.
the Opera. There's a
Oh,
Phantom
Phantom
of
of
the
the Opera.
Opera that
Yeah.
and before the colorized one was like readily available to anybody, and then I like he pointed out like no one loves film as much as him and does more for film, and he's like, and I'm not and I love that I'm not just talking America, Italy, France, like everywhere he's on the globe doing. I'm like, yes, that's right, because
Yeah.
people should know that Martin Scorsese is like. I know all the superhero people get mad at him, but I'm like, he's doing stuff for everything. Like
Yeah.
his taste
Yeah.
is way more refined than probably anybody else who's gonna walk the earth.
And he
'Cause-
spends money. He invests in all these different in all these projects for film restoration and
Mhm.
proper storage and accumulating lost movies and all that. He's on this quest to preserve as much history as he can before he passes.
Yeah.
And that was a real bonding thing with him and Nick. There was one story that I didn't end up including with it because it seemed a little out of place. And I tried it with it, and I even ran it by the team at Paramount.
Mhm.
I'm like, what do you think with this in there? And he's talking about when he got the gig and he found out that it was his uncle who had asked Marty to put him in a movie.
That was in there.
Yeah, but then he
Oh.
goes, so he says that part, right?
Yeah.
Where he's like, but then he goes, and I'm like, I mean, I'm only in this movie because of my uncle wanting me in this movie. And then he's like, I had this moment where I realized, like, man, I've won an Academy Award and stuff, and I don't know what that means. I don't know what that means to me, but I thought that would mean something. I mean, like, am I only in this film because of my uncle? And it was just really, and he's laughing, and it was just such a jovial moment that it just felt a little out of place in the final thing, the whole statement that he had on that. But it was really sweet because he's like, uh, I don't want to be there just because it's a favor to somebody. I want to
Yeah.
be there because you want me there.
Well, he's
And
also at that time he's one of the biggest stars around,
yeah,
like box office, like and credential wise, like that's during his like prime run
yeah,
too.
yeah, absolutely. And he admits in this, you can tell that how open he was and how transparent during the interview because he admits he's like, I'm not your normal Scorsese actor.
Yeah.
I'm not the guy that he would normally put in there. And then he even pokes a little fun at himself. He's like, I got these mm, wild eyes and whatever, and and so I think that he struggles. You could see a little bit of his
Mhm.
struggle about the crazy Cage thing
Right.
and the part of him that is so sincere about most everything that he does. And but anyway, his approach to this interview was so open and grounded and thoughtful
Mhm.
that I think it lends a lot of really wonderful insight and texture to what he brought to the character in the film, and a lot of rare elements for an interview, especially of
Yeah.
someone on this caliber.
Yeah,
Of this
it's like he's
caliber.
been chomping at the bit to finally get to do this interview talking about the
Yeah,
movie. Like
yeah,
probably one that's been like sitting with him, and he's, like he probably names his top movies he's been in. I bet that's possibly going to come up for him
Sure.
because it seemed like it was one of the prime experiences for him and something he was pretty proud of. And
Yeah.
Scorsese talks about him like in some, I can't remember exactly what it was, but he was talking about some actors being very calculated physically and some being very calculated with like mentally with what they're doing. And he does both. And it's just mesmerizing to watch.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. And he wasn't an obvious choice for Scorsese either necessarily right away.
Mhm.
And he certainly wasn't for Schrader. Schrader was very much like, "What are you doing?"
Mhm.
And he tried to sort of rattle Nick's cage
Yeah.
prior to this thing, like, you can't be going over the top. You can't be whatever, whatever. And he was so worried about what Cage was going to do with Frank Pierce. But in the end, he was like, I can't imagine this being in anyone else's hands.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's a great trio there of Scorsese, Cage, and Schrader that goes
Yeah.
on with this. Is Schrader's a fun, yeah, it's crazy. Like you just getting one of these people would have been like enough to like satisfy. Like finally, we're getting Bringing Out the Dead, and they got a new thing from one of the people. That would have been enough. But you got those three, and let's not sell short Robert Richardson, who's like
Oh, yeah.
iconic himself. He shoots Scorsese,
Oh,
Stone,
man.
Tarantino.
And
Like,
I've done a bunch of stuff with Bob on all of his
yeah,
Oliver Stone releases.
right.
And so he's like the rapport is there instantly when he walks in the door. And so he was definitely of course, the easiest in terms of the interview and the logistics and him showing up for it and all that. What I didn't expect was such a deeply personal conversation with him because
Hmm.
he reveals what he was going through personally and with his family at the time that this film was being made, and how there were echoes of his real internal experience happening on screen in Bringing Out the Dead. And so there's this very, you can tell it was a hard interview for him in some ways to talk about
Hmm.
some of the stuff that he does, but it's another example of like, man, the just his willingness to open up like that
Yeah.
is so incredible, and it's amazing to capture that history. So yeah, those guys, I mean, those were the four that I knew I needed to get, and I just I couldn't have asked for it to turn out any better and to feel any more lucky that it did come together like it did. And then the archive team, because there was a making of documentary on the
Hmm.
DVD years ago,
Right.
but it's one of those, you remember in the 90s when these things were cut together like they're on Ritalin. I mean,
Oh
like
yeah, they're like
they're on
the
crack.
EPK, the electronic press kit, and
Yeah.
then they
And
sometimes
then they
they air them
cut
on
it.
HBO or something real fast between movies.
It's cut so fast. All the edits, all the
Yeah.
sound bites are like 2-second sound bites, and it
Hmm.
cuts to a movie, then you like a movie clip, and then you're back, and there's crazy music sort of running over some of the voices and stuff. And I'm not faulting anything. I mean, that was definitely the style of its
Right.
time. It's very much of its time. But I asked the amazing archive team at Paramount, who have always been there in every way for me, any kind of crazy request, they've always been there. And I said, do these interviews exist in full? Do we have all of this EPK stuff,
Yeah.
or was that discarded because that sometimes happens? And then with the help of my executive that I was working with on this, she worked with them. And after maybe a week or two, they came back and they're like, yeah, we have the full uncut EPK interviews with all of them. So it has Goodman, it has Ving, it has Sizemore, it has Mark Anthony, it has Patricia Arquette. And so I pitched the idea, and this was after everything else was almost done.
Hmm.
I'm like, what if I cut individual pieces for these so these interviews can have more life, so we can have Goodman's voice there, have Ving's voice there. And they were like, how much more is that going to cost us if you want to do that? And I said, I don't need the budget's settled. That's fine. I just want to put as much on this as I can. And so they're like, all right. So they sent it all in, and I used as much of all those interviews as I could and built them as standalone pieces. And so the original featurette is on there
Hmm.
from that DVD, but in addition, you have the full interviews. I mean, not, I mean, like 95% of the interview footage with these folks. So their voices are included too. Because there was a lot of really insightful stuff, especially from Patricia.
Mm-hmm.
Goodman was at kind of an interesting, weird point in his career. They didn't spend a lot of time with Ving Rhames. I don't know why. Sizemore was kind of out of his mind in his interview, so his was extremely brief,
Mm-hmm.
and I used all that I could out of that. Mark Anthony's was long and very thoughtful. He was very, very humbled to be a part of this project. So they all bring something a little bit different to it. And I was thrilled that, I mean, essentially here we have the whole cast. And
Yeah.
even though it doesn't say new next to those on-set interviews, really they are new
Yeah.
because 90% of those haven't been seen before. So it's
Yeah. Do
exciting.
do the actors have to sign off on that, or once they did that interview, it's good for as long as it's within the use of the studio, you get to
It,
use it, or
that can be contractually different from film to film.
gotcha.
So it's not always the case that we can use stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
So when I proposed this, that had to be run through legal to make sure that the appropriate paperwork was included in their original sign-offs and it all was clear. So sometimes you're surprised, like when I did
Mm-hmm.
Bad News Bears, and Jackie Earl Haley mentioned some footage his dad had shot on set with an like a Super 8 camera, and Jackie found it and then sent it to me. And then I presented it to the team, like, is there any chance we can include this on the Bad News Blu-ray? And fully assuming Paramount would be like, no, there's no way we can clear this. But they were able to clear it. And so it's
Hmm.
on there. So the only known footage from behind the scenes of Bad News Bears is now on that Blu-ray. It's like 5 minutes of Jackie Earl Haley's dad's like Super 8 footage. But what a cool thing, what a cool
Yeah,
artifact to have there. And it was the same here. I was so thrilled that we had the appropriate clearances to put it all together.
that's incredible. Were there any known like deleted scene material or anything that was possibly on the hunt during this, or
Not
no?
really. There were, I think there are a few like additional shots from some sequences
Mm-hmm.
that were a part of it, but no, they were very, it was an expensive movie to shoot. They had a lot of lights working. They were in New York City at night, really
Mm-hmm.
in winter when they're making this. And so even though it was a big picture, they had a lot of moving pieces, and that's one of the things that Scorsese talks about is like we had to have everything planned out. We had
Yeah.
so it was very well oiled and honed down by the time they were actually in production on it. So there wasn't a lot of
Okay.
extra stuff that was shot. Not a lot of celluloid was wasted for
Gotcha.
it.
And speaking of celluloid, Richardson also benefits off this too because the transfer is just
Yeah.
stunning. Like
Yeah.
I was like looking at it, I was like, oh wow, this is like a whole new movie to me almost.
Yeah.
And it looks because we've been stuck with a DVD
Yeah.
um forever. And it stinks we waited so long, but this is the best result because I imagine if it would have came out on some just hurry up and get it on Blu-ray, it would have probably been some sort of like up convert, not the best, paid attention to transfer or something. Now we get this thing, which is in the collector era of these discs, get something that's like, wow, I don't know that it'll ever look better than this.
Yeah. Yeah. It really is the ultimate presentation. And that's often said, not always the case, but
Hmm.
here it 100% is. And man, it's never looked or sounded better.
Yeah, and since it's a movie that's all primarily at night and dark, like being on 4K really benefits it. So
Yeah.
that's pretty exciting. Yeah, that's a pretty crazy journey of what 4 or 5 years it's
I,
been
I mean,
for
well, from the beginning of the production, it's about
2
2 years.
years,
But
but
then from my efforts
your
to
chase.
my chase was, oh geez, way even beyond that. But
Hmm.
yeah, I mean it's many years. And when my comps finally showed up last week,
Hmm.
I opened that box and it was just this moment of like, man, I if this all ends tomorrow for me, I've kind of done what I need to do.
Yeah.
I can't imagine wanting, like, there's nothing else on my wish list. There's nothing else on my dream list. I've been a part of so many movies that I really, really love. I've encountered movies that I hadn't seen before to work on them and fell in love with them. I have had the great honor of being a part of so much stuff that I absolutely adore. And I mean, 10 plus years of this, and I'm just like, I feel so satisfied with all that I've done.
Hmm.
And I, if it ends tomorrow, I'm okay.
Yeah.
You
You've
know,
got a Martin Scorsese interview with your name on it. You have a Nicolas Cage interview with
it's
your name on it.
crazy.
You got Paul Schrader. Like,
It's
if
crazy.
you only got to do one title ever and it was this,
I know.
I know you did a lot for the Halloween stuff back in the day, but this is just like, I mean, we've also seen things go from being these, a lot of the work being done being these horror movies,
Mhm.
cult movies, to now this type of work's getting put onto A titles, Oscar titles. Like you've worked on Deer Hunter, things
Mhm.
like that. It's crazy that it kind of starts back in the Anchor Bay days, and it has bled into this focus going into. I mean, I know DVDs and stuff. They did interviews and Clockwork stuff, but I feel like there's a sort of vibe tone or whatever to some of the interviews and stuff they would put into like these horror titles with like Shout Factory and stuff that has now led itself into these A titles where it's more comfortable interviews, more like just people saying what they want to say rather than like company line interviews that we
Oh, I
used
see
to
what
get
you're
on
saying.
the Blu-ray. So I feel like that mentality has like bled into, for a good thing, into our A catalog titles, which
Yeah,
is
I
good.
think, yeah, that has so much to do with the studio though too,
Hmm.
because Paramount is wonderful to work with for everybody, and the head of marketing there, they got the whole marketing team. Most of them are horror fans, and so they get
It's
this
good.
stuff.
Hmm.
And but then there are other studios that I do stuff for where I know I have to edit extremely conservatively, and I approach even my questioning, my conversations with a little more of a
Right.
conservative aspect to it, just because I know they're not the studio's not going to allow certain things to be discussed. I mean, some of them don't
Right.
even want you to talk about bad weather or like if someone slipped and fell one day or
Mm.
whatever. And so it's not always this open, but when that's the case, it's incredible. And for me, the doors of, I mean, Deer Hunter was still Shout Factory, but
Yeah.
everything changed for me in terms of the diversity of what I was part of once I
Hmm.
started working with Paramount, because then I'm doing like Ragtime and Harold and Maude and Bugsy Malone and all this other Bad News Bears, like I mentioned earlier.
Hmm.
It was so wonderful. And earlier this year, I did Once Upon a Time in the West and
That's an
Breakdown,
excellent
like we talked
one
about.
too. Yeah.
Yeah. All stuff I never thought I would have a chance to
Yeah.
touch. And at the same time that I'm working on those, then I'm cutting something for like, I don't know, some Z grade horror film for an indie distributor or something like that.
Right.
I mean, I remember when I was working, the first any kind of contact with Scorsese was when I was working on La Dolce Vita. There
Oh.
was
Oh.
there was
Yeah.
a Blu-ray re-release of that, and there was an interview introduction because that's one of these restorations that he funded that he
Hmm.
was very very close to, and so he did this introduction to it that I was working on, and at the same time I was working on Eight-Legged Freaks for Shout.
Yeah.
So literally the same day that I get David Arquette's people telling me he's declining the interview for Eight-Legged Freaks, I'm communicating with Martin Scorsese's people about La Dolce Vita. And it's like, all right, I guess this makes it easier to take this getting turned down by David
Right.
Arquette.
David Arquette. He's been living here for a bit because he's some chair or something at Ball State University where I went to college in
Oh,
Muncie. That's in Muncie, Indiana. It's like an hour and a half from me, but yeah, he's been here a lot. So I don't
I
know.
wanted to interview
Maybe.
him really badly for that. I mean, yeah, it was COVID when it was happening, so
Mm,
I don't know. They didn't say that that was part of the deal with it, but I was just really shocked that he wouldn't want to because he hasn't been the lead in that many films. And
right.
they like Eight-Legged Freaks is a blast. That movie's so
Hmm.
much fun, and he's good in it. And so I had high hopes that he could come on board, but it just didn't end up working out. But that was
Interesting.
a great example of like the A B of what life in this realm is like. Like you're
Yeah.
working on Eight-Legged Freaks, you're also working on the Dolce Vita at the same time. It's crazy.
Gotcha. And so now that you've um filled this giant void in the Scorsese catalog on home video, I guess there's really what's left for him is Alice Doesn't Live Here Anymore. That was last put on DVD by Warner Brothers in 2004. So
It's
that
been
is
that
the
long, huh?
yeah.
God.
There was a time where what's the what if they're in the UK they're
Studio Canal,
Imprint
Imprint. They're
what's the
UK.
yeah Imprint I think announced it, had it coming, and then pulled it late in the game.
Hmm.
Or somebody. Yeah, I think they did that. And so that remains like his probably highest profile title that doesn't have a Blu-ray even. So
I'm sure it'll happen at some point. I mean, look at who would have
I've
thought
been
that
I've been
we'd.
looking for a Warner Archive to just pop it out on disc, but
Yeah,
I didn't see
yeah.
didn't see
Well,
it.
I mean, Warner hasn't been real keen on licensing anyway. I think that they did some licensing stuff with Shout. I think they are doing some with Arrow now. So hopefully that comes along down
And
the
they always
pipeline.
Criterion. They always do Criterion. They seem to get whoever.
Yeah,
Typically, it seems to me like oh it's Criterion. We'll let them do it, but
yeah, yeah,
other
yeah.
ones tougher. But have you ever done anything for Criterion, or they got their whole
No,
in-house
actually,
operation?
the first time, as close as I ever got, was the first time that I was supposed to interview
Mm-hmm.
Scorsese for Bringing Out the Dead. We were at this. His assistant connected me with this my sort of counterpart or a counterpart of mine
Okay.
over that does this stuff for Criterion, because they were going to interview, like, shoot some intro that he was going to do for one of their discs,
Okay.
and they thought, well, we can just shoot them at the same time. You know, you guys can split the cost. It'll make it easier for you both. And that didn't end up, like I said earlier, that didn't end up working out. And but we almost had a shoot day where we were doing Criterion and Paramount at the same time, and we would have had a chance to sort of do
Okay.
stuff. But it was interesting to talk with that gal because, man, I am the budgets they have to work with are the stuff of fantasy in my
Oh,
mind.
really? Yeah.
I mean, oh yeah, they are in the stratosphere when it comes to what they invest in this stuff. And no
Gotcha.
one, I was floored by what their
Gotcha.
budgets are that they have to work with, and so jealous.
Gotcha. Yeah. I way back in the day, Justin, I beta tested their menus on their Blu-rays, which carried over the 4K.
Oh wow.
They different they had like 3 different versions of it. They went with the one I thought was the best. So, but they had because they open like you click it and it goes over and it goes
Yeah, yeah.
over. They
Yep.
had one where it went up. And they
Oh,
had another one. I think they had it on the other side of the screen where
I
it went
like their
that way.
menu
So
format. I
I
like
like,
how it
yeah,
does that.
I like that. But there was different versions of it, and we beta tested it at Testronic, when I was there and going through because that was one of our um clients, and they were
Well, good
yeah,
choice.
I was like ooh. So I got to do, and it's funny because I got to do we worked on their before I left and moved here. I worked on like their first 5 titles, and I was so tired of seeing like I didn't pick up The Third Man right away and some
Yeah.
other ones, and then those went out of print. But I was like, I saw them every day for like 2 or 3
Oh
weeks,
yeah,
so
yeah.
I put off buying them, and then they became and then when I wanted them, they were out of print. But Third Man has been lovingly redone by like Studio Canal and stuff like that. So
Yeah, well,
things
and
come back around.
they do. They find a way. They definitely find their way. And what Criterion was doing and what Shout Factory was doing, I think, really inspired Paramount
Hmm.
to, when licenses came up again, they're like,
Yeah,
you know what, this time around, we're just going to hold on to it. And they brought
yeah,
these titles back home and did these. They're like, let's try our hand at this stuff. And I think
yeah,
that it's just been a wonderful success,
yeah,
the way they've handled it. And it's been an exciting, I think, breath of fresh air, not just for horror fans to finally see this stuff taken seriously, but a company like Paramount diving into their catalog, which is usually just left to bargain bins at a certain point, and really investing in each one of these things. I mean, hats off to everyone inside Paramount that's part of these, because
hmm,
they put a hell of a lot of time and effort and money into each one of these things, and they simply don't have to. So I think it's great.
I was happy to just see something like Nick of Time just get a bare bones release. I was like,
Yeah.
yes, thank you.
Yeah.
I was like,
I still get
that'll do it.
excited for bare bones. Yeah. I
Yeah,
mean, I'm happy to get whatever. If I
yeah,
come across a movie, I'm like, oh my gosh, I need to have that.
yeah.
Yeah, I'm the same way. But when you get those bonus features,
Oh yeah,
it
yeah. No,
sweetens
you
the
have
deal.
like the Bring Out the Dead is this like little archival piece of history now. That's like they're like you you got the whole range of everything. It really hits all the high notes of everything you'd want in a release. So yeah,
Oh man, thank
people
you.
should pick it up. What else you got going on in the works here for uh, bonus features disc release that you got in the process?
Paramount is kind of at a standstill right now, just while this sale thing is pending.
Mm-hmm.
And until that's done, there isn't a whole lot happening on the Paramount front. But everybody there, like, we're constantly in touch. Like, can't wait to get going again. Can't wait to whatever. Outside of the Paramount Scares Volume 2, um, which has that breakdown on it, of course. But there's a few titles coming out from a few different companies in the next month or two here and beyond. There's the Wolfman, the Benicio del Toro
Mm-hmm.
Wolfman on 4K from Scream. Shocker on 4K, also from Scream that I did. There's a Full Moon box set from Umbrella, which is region free out of Australia, that has Dollman, Demonic Toys, Dollman versus Demonic Toys, and Demonic Toys 2 in it. That was really fun to do. Then there's Born on the 4th of July 4K from Shout. That's landing in November. A Simple Plan from Arrow in
Yes,
November.
it's a big
Uh,
one. Yeah.
yeah. Hush was a massive project for Shout that's coming out at the end of November. The Mike Flanagan picture,
Which you
Hush.
found little home videos that you're
Dude,
have
it was
integrated in there, which
crazy.
is very Shyamalan like, which is awesome to keep there, put there.
It was like the Jackie Haley stuff where,
Mm-hmm.
and this has happened a few times where I'm interviewing someone, they just mention in passing. In the beginning of the interview with Mike, because I spent 2 days at his house and interviewing him, one of the, because I do a ridiculous amount of research, right? So I walk in just hopefully prepared for whatever side road we end up on.
Mm-hmm.
And but one of the things I really wanted to talk to him about was his filmmaking from when he was a kid, because we're about the same age and we were doing a lot of the same stuff at the same time, renting a VHS camcorder, making movies with the family and friends in the backyard, and then editing them deck to deck and all this. And I wanted to talk, and so that's how our conversation began, and it really broke the ice nicely. But he was saying things like, yeah, my we did a remake of The Untouchables, and he was like 8 at the time or 10 or something like that. And I'm like, what? That's how ambitious he was.
Yeah.
And he mentioned a couple other things too, but that was really the first for Mike. That's where he cut his teeth. It's where the
Mm-hmm.
bug bit him, but also where he first started dealing with editing and how to put sound over a picture, and let's figure out how to integrate a soundtrack. And so at the end of the interview, at the end of the day that day, I'm like, is there any chance that do you have that stuff? And he's like, I'm sure I have it on tape somewhere. And I walked in the next morning and there they were, 2 tapes sitting on his kitchen counter for me.
Oh
And
wow.
so we had them scanned. And so now when you watch the Flanagan interview, there's clips from his Untouchables in there where you see Mike in a fedora and like a trench coat
Oh
playing one of
wow.
these.
This is hilarious.
And I picked a couple choice scenes from these movies too. Like there's a shootout scene. There's this really cute interaction between two kids at a water bar, and then I don't know. Anyway, it's so cool to contextualize what he's saying as he's talking about shooting this stuff, and then having the footage rolling over it. It was really cool. But yeah, this version of Hush, it has two versions of the film, which has never been on video before. That was went
Mm-hmm.
straight to Netflix, and so there's the original, which is remastered now, 4K, of course, and then there's a black and white version that has most of the score stripped out of it, and they call it the shush cut, and it's a much more immersive experience in a film that's very reliant on sound design
Mm-hmm.
because it not a lot of dialogue in it at all. And so it's a very unique experience that happened quite by accident. And I won't spoil the whole story behind it because there's commentaries on both versions. There's interviews with the entire cast, crew. I mean, we went all out on this, and Mike was so open. Everybody, Kate was wonderful. Everybody was just awesome. And so that comes out at the end of November. And then we also just announced it's not actually landing till February now, but for Mill Creek of all companies, I just finished working on Bewitched, the complete series,
Oh yeah, yeah, okay.
which is hitting Blu-ray and newly remastered every single episode. And
Wow.
I teamed up with the historian Herbie J. Pilato, who co-produced a half an hour documentary where he brought in because Herbie's written several books on Bewitched, and so he knew a bunch of people from the series and brought them in for interviews. And it's a really fun, fast-moving documentary piece in there that really lays out the story of the show and its legacy and all the surprising names that were a part of it and all of that. So that's another one that took like 2 years to bring to the finish line. It just kept hitting speed bumps, and Herbie and I'm just thrilled that it's finally done and
Right.
going to see the light of day in February. So outside of those, I'm in the Scream magazine out of the UK this month, the October issue, and then the next one after that with this exhaustive Night of the Demons 1, 2, and 3 retrospective. And I'm in a Rue Morgue with a little bit on this 50 vilest villains column in there, and then my TV Guide Remind column every month in Remind magazine about shuttered amusement parks and roadside attractions. It's called Roadside Memories, and that's in every issue of Remind published by TV Guide. So that's where I am in print too. So it's been busy. It's been pretty crazy.
Gotcha. Well, I like that your work's getting out there. So I know it's runs you down, gets you gets you really busy, but your work is very much appreciated all the time and stuff. It's always exciting to hear your stories behind, like, because I mean, there's the making of the movie, but then there's the making of the movie, which I think comes with a lot of exciting experiences itself, especially when you're getting people back together to, look back. And it's been years to kind of reminisce and see their thoughts on it.
That's always really special when you get people to reunite. That's one of my favorite things, and it's happened so many times over the years. And I'm trying to make that more of a focus on my podcast to talk about releases and the stories behind them. And I have a lot of historical stuff that I'm going to be pulling into that too. Not just old interviews, but also just the stories behind some of these releases from over the years, because there's definitely some entertaining ones, that's for sure.
Gotcha. Where can people find your podcast? And you got merch too, right?
It's it's on all the different platforms. Just look for my name and Radio Hour. My website is justinbeahm.com. And I have on my site actually a CD from this surf rockabilly band that I played drums for is on there. It's $10 free shipping right now. But also there's a link to Redbubble. I put a few shirt and like wearable things up on Redbubble, and that's linked from my site too. So there's some pretty fun Reverend stuff on there.
Gotcha. Very cool. Very cool. Well, thank you so much for sharing your time with me and telling me about that, personal nerd out, but I think other people appreciate the bringing out the dead story that you shared here and all your little insights, and just, so cool that this happened, the people involved, and, finally getting it out there after years and years of work. Is there a bucket list title left that we can put out there for us to look for that?
I can't really think of one right now. There's so many. I'm gonna say no. I'm gonna say no. I'm done.
Done. Complete. This is
complete. Yep. The journey is complete.
Journey's complete. Okay. And where can people keep up with you on social media?
Just my name on Facebook or Instagram. I'm on both. Just Justin Beahm. And hit me up if you ever want to reach out. You can contact me through those or through the website. I love to hear from folks and happy to answer any questions you have or take suggestions, feedback on the stuff you've watched. I love that very much. So thank you. And thank you for having me on. It's great to be back here after so many years.
Yeah, awesome. All right. Well, I'm on the socials at Brandon4KUHD. As a reminder, October 19th, I'll be a guest at Doctoberfest, a Doctor Who festival in Canby, Indiana. If you're around, it's a fun time. It's free. You can come by, say hi, enjoy the festivities. As for the podcast, the show will return. Until then, stay film positive.
Thank you for listening. The Brandon Peters Show is a Creative Zombie Studios production. Produced by Brad Shoemaker and Brandon Peters. Written and edited by Brandon Peters. Announcer vocals by Jessica Alsman. Theme song by Metavari. Web design and show art by Brad Shoemaker with Brandon Peters. All music and clips featured in the episode are property of their respective studios, and no infringement is intended. Additional information on this and other episodes at brandonpetershow.com. For any inquiries, press opportunities, or sponsorship, contact mail@brandonpetershow.com. The show is available on Apple Music, Spotify, or anywhere podcasts are found.